I want to take a look at a 2016 Macro FRQ question number 3. So I'm going to share my screen. All right, here we go. So the following table shows a number of donuts or cupcakes that John and Erica can each produce in one day. So we've got our table there, and this is it's pretty straightforward. You know, there's a question about absolute advantage and then comparative advantage in parts A and B. So this should be pretty straightforward. You know, calculate the opportunity cost. Actually, part A, you don't have to do that, right? Absolute advantage, let's just get that one out of the way real quick. All right, whoops. All right, so absolute advantage is what in donuts? Who can produce more, right? Pretty straightforward. Look at the chart. We see John can make 200 donuts in a day, and Erica can make 150, right? So absolute advantage is John, because 200 is more than 150, right? And absolute advantage is just who can produce more, right? What's the largest number there? All right, so now it gets a little bit more tricky. We need to go and calculate opportunity costs, right? So I'm going to go off to the side because this chart isn't real big. All right, so start with John. And we need to know his opportunity cost of donuts, right? So as always, that's the price of the other good, right? So in this case, we're talking about cupcakes in terms of donuts. So you're going to take that other number there, which is 100, divided by 200, so we get 1/2, right? And that is in terms of cupcakes. I'm going to run out of space here. You know what? I'm going to close this. Let's do this again so it's much larger. So we've got, oops. All right, just copying the chart over, 200, 100, 150, 50. All right, so we started with John here, right? So in terms of cupcakes, the price was going to be 100 over 200, right? So 1/2 cupcake. And so this is the cost of donut and of cupcakes. And we know it's the flip, right? So this would be 200 over 100. So this is 2, but it's in terms of the other thing, which is donuts. All right, so same thing over here. We're going to flip, right? For Erica, the opportunity cost for donuts is you take the cupcakes over the donuts. So what is that? 1/3. And same way, we flip it the other way, right? 150 over 50, the reciprocal of this, and it's in terms of donuts. So it's always good to make sure, right? You know, these should be reciprocals of each other, and if they don't, and you can always double check your work going back. If that doesn't line up, then you've made a mistake somewhere. So you should essentially start over and try and figure out where your mistake was. Okay, so the question was, who has the comparative advantage in donuts, right? So we look at this column over here, and who has the lowest opportunity cost, right? So John's opportunity cost is 1/2 of a cupcake, but Erica's is 1/3, right? So So Erica should be your answer to part B. And the reason would be because the opportunity cost of 1/3 cupcakes is less than 1/2 for John. Okay. Now, all right, let's close this. Let's go back to the question just so we can read. Let's write on here for this part. All right, so part C. So A and B are pretty straightforward, right? Calculate the opportunity cost. Absolute advantage is very straightforward. Comparative advantage, not too bad. Part C is a little bit trickier, right? And this is a terms of trade question that maybe isn't as obvious that it is a terms of trade question. So assume that John and Erica decide to specialize according to their comparative advantages. So they're going to produce all of whatever good they have, the comparative advantages, and then presumably they're gonna trade, and they actually give us the exchange ratio, right? 1 cupcake for 4 donuts. And then they ask us, part 1 here, indicate whether or not specialization and trade are beneficial to John, and same thing, beneficial to Erica. So what you have to do here is go back to your opportunity costs. So let's write that again. So for donuts, right, we had 1/2 and 1/3, and these are both cupcakes. So what they're asking here, and I think the most students would say, well, everybody gains from trade, right? Well, not necessarily. Mutually beneficial trade, yes, but we don't know that John and Erica, had an discussion about what the proper price or terms of trade of these 2 products were. They were just given that one cupcake is equal to 4 donuts, right? So we have to go back and figure out what the range of mutually beneficial trade would be, right? So if you look at the opportunity cost, generally it would be anywhere in between these 2 numbers, right? And if you look at what we have here, we have 1 cupcake for 4 donuts. So we've got essentially a price here of a quarter of a cupcake per donut, right? That's what we're comparing these to. This is the price. So we know anything between 1/3 and 1/2 is mutually beneficial, right? So let's think about these in terms of fractions, right? So 1/3 is what? 0.33 to 0.5. Okay, so anything in between there, we know they would both gain from trade. Well, the price is actually over here, right? We're outside the range. The range is somewhere in here. We know they're both going to gain from there. So all of a sudden, we've got a price that is not mutually beneficial to both people. So that should raise a flag. Well, somebody's not going to benefit here. Well, how do you figure out who's not going to benefit? So what's going on here is that the essentially so the price is 1 cupcake for 4 donuts. So the value of cupcakes is being is too high, right? And the value of donuts is too low. We need to change that ratio. Now the question isn't asking us about the ratio, but if we know we're outside of that range, we can figure out. So essentially, whoever is producing donuts is getting the short end of the stick, right? And whoever is producing cupcakes is getting a pretty good deal, right? Because they're getting more donuts for that cupcakes than they ought to. So go back to part B, right? Because they said both. So Erica was going to produce donuts because she had a comparative advantage, and then John was going to produce cupcakes. Well, what we just said, right? Whoever is producing donuts here is not getting a very good deal, right? So that would be Erica, and she is not experiencing gains from trade. And then John, this answer would be yes, right? He's getting a pretty good deal because he's getting a better ratio of donuts for his cupcakes than ought to be the case given this terms of trade over here. So again, part C is kind of odd, but you should know that you should have to do a little bit of calculations, little math there to justify getting that answer, because you wouldn't want to just say it's not the case that everyone gains from trade all the time, right? Often price, or in this case, terms of trade, determine who wins and who loses in this case. Okay, so let's jump to part D now. Assume Erica discovers a new cupcake production technique that will increase her daily production of cupcakes only. So they want us to redraw the PPC curve, showing this change in technology, right? So, and also before and after. So they want you to show essentially the shift, right? Okay, so they said donuts down here, and cupcakes up here. So Erica initially could produce, let's see, what is it, 150? And then it was 50 cupcakes, right? So this was her initial PPC. And then now the new cupcake production technique, pay attention to this, right? Cupcakes only. And they don't give you a number. They just know that it's larger than that. So her production of donuts is not affected, right? So we don't know this number, but really we're just showing this sort of pivot in the PPC curve. All right, so that's enough for part D, just to show this shift in the PPC curve.